Welcome to the Lisa Wexler Show podcast. Think of it like a magazine or a box of chocolates. You never know what you'll get. From politics to pop culture, healthcare to legal issues, it's all here. And my behind-the-wheel chats are personal observations created especially for you on podcast only. Enjoy. And welcome back to the show. Diane Cece is the leader of the East Norwalk Neighborhood Association. She writes a compelling, informative newsletter and with updates about what's happening in that neighborhood. You may not live there, but you may go through there. You may care about it. You may commute through it. You may work there. Diane Cece, welcome back to the Lisa Wexler Show today. Hello. Hi.
Hi, Lisa. We haven't talked in a long time. I'm happy to be back on. Hope everything is good with you.
Yeah, everything is good. And actually, it's very timely that you're on today, Diane, because I don't know if you saw, but the Live, Ride, Work bill, otherwise known as the TOD bill, the Transit-Oriented Development Bill, which has a very, very big impact on East Norwalk and in Norwalk in general, was passed through the House with some Democratic dissent, but mostly along party lines. And it's probably going to make its way to the Senate. And I know that CT169strong.org has very, very strong objections to it. And it was heralded as a sea change, and it's not my words, by Elena DeGraw, a sea change in the way zoning is looked at in Connecticut. A sea change.
Yeah, it's a little disappointing that, not surprising, but disappointing after having kind of beat this thing back, I think, the past two sessions, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But it, kept rearing its ugly head, and I think it was really only a matter of time. The unfortunate thing with that bill and others, and I'll just add the caveat, I hadn't been as involved this time around, only because of the East Norwalk issues, but which is also unfortunate because this is a bigger impact. What's really happening with these bills, and I think you had the folks on last week, is that it's really seriously whittling away local control of anything. And the impacts on the ability to handle increased development, and you pointed out all the time, the impact on the environment. When these things, when the power of the local community is taken away, one of the first things that gets whittled away is a real opportunity to challenge things based on the environmental impact. And I think, I'm not sure if it's that bill, Lisa, forgive me if I'm confused, but one of the bills actually takes out some of the reviews that help to protect communities altogether.
Well, this one and another one. So another one actually barred environmental groups from being able to intervene in cases where they can show that there would be an impact on pollution.
Exactly.
That's not this one, but this one has a lot of other things in it where you can build as of right, which many people feel is really very bad for the environment.
Yeah, and that's inherent in the as of right, is that it does bypass some of the what would have been with special permits and even
that's right.
Site plan reviews. So yeah, and we're certainly facing that kind of ahead of the schedule in Norwalk, actually, because we recently had a massive zoning regulation rewrite, and already there were some components in there that kind of got watered down in an effort to expedite development and development in industry, I'll put as well. So
the problem is there's such a, here's the problem. And it's always been the problem. It was a problem for me when I was on P&Z in Westport, and I understand it even more viscerally as a judge. When you have one side of the equation whose mission and whose monies are devoted towards seeing an objective happen, and you have the other side that just sort of woke up in the morning and said, what? And they don't have collectively a profit motive in seeing that other thing happen or seeing it not happen, you basically get a very one-sided debate.
Yes.
And you have a very one-sided army, right? You have a very one-sided battle going on.
And well-funded, typically.
Correct. And so when you are in that quasi-judicial capacity of being a planning and zoning department, and you see this developer come and they have done the traffic reports and they have done the surveys and they have done this and they've done that and blah, 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 blah. And the other side is like, but wait a minute, we know that that's not accurate. And so the Planning and Zoning Board will say, well, tell me how it's not accurate. So I have evidence on both sides. And they'll say, well, Your Honor, we don't have $25,000 to do our independent traffic report, but we live here. We can tell you, not Your Honor, but you know what I mean, like the Planning and Zoning Commissioner, we live here. We can tell you that we know it's going to be bad for the environment. We walk here. We live here. We go to school here. We work here. And then the Planning and Zoning Commission is left with all these fancy reports that tell them only one conclusion, that is a foregone conclusion very often, that the developer is proposing, versus like, And you're the and I commend you for being the leader of this grassroots volunteer organization that is just trying to have a voice for your neighborhood. But it must feel very frustrating a lot of the time.
That's a good word. It is very frustrating, and what it does is it leaves us in two really horrible positions. Because these things creep up, in the time frame that they do, it really appears to people, and for all intent and purposes, it is true, that they really only hear from us when we're out opposing these things, and that's unfortunate. But because the opposition of these things does take so much time, effort, and in a couple of these cases, this one, money, it does leave small organizations like ENNA having to battle these things rather than do some, more positive things that we'd like to be working on. But it also, this disadvantage that you're talking about is, I don't think people really understand just how bad it is. One of the things that needs to happen is that we're not protected statutorily, and you know this because you're on planning and zoning. Once an applicant files an application, meaning legally filed, it's date stamped in the P&Z office, a statutory time clock starts to tick.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And that time clock is 100% in favor of the applicant.
Yes.
And in some regards, I agree with that because I'm also a property rights advocate, believe it or not. But that time clock is so restrictive that by its very nature, it works entirely against the community.
Right, because if you don't rule on it within a certain amount of time, it's deemed to be approved, not unapproved, approved.
Exactly. And so that time to rally people, then to be left to, you're right, we are supposed to be considered experts if we're living in the environment. And I think there's been law cases relative to that, but that doesn't seem to work in Norwalk. So unless you can come up with the bucks and the manpower of people who aren't volunteers to coordinate that, you're kind of left out of the conversation. The other thing is it's a catch-22, and I'm just going through this now with the P&Z director. We asked for a postponement on this latest application, which is an MTA transportation maintenance terminal up at Norden. Because as they were funneling in the documents from the applicants, it started becoming more and more aware that the traffic peer review wasn't really going to bring out anything that supported this not being a very good idea there. And of course, they condition everything away, as you know. Mm-hmm. But by the time you get to that point and realize, okay, now we've got to hire a traffic engineer, civil engineer, and a lawyer. You're already coming up on that clock. And the city's response is, well, this was technically filed back in February. But, my response is, why would we ever go out, like on day one of an application and start spending money on experts
of course,
for something that might turn into so what? It's not even what we thought it was going to be. And that happens sometimes. Or there's something where there would have been an open dialogue in the beginning to either mitigate certain, objectionable points, or the peer review study that comes back could say, this thing is a disaster. They either have to go back to the board or you should deny it or whatever. So there's a point in time where then you got to make a call. Now, should we go out and spend money and our efforts to do this? And unfortunately, that decision-making normally comes a little bit closer to the time clock, and that's where we are right now.
What would you?
This is Wednesday
go ahead.
night.
Tell us about this. Tell us about what's happening.
Okay,
Wednesday night.
so I know we only have a couple minutes, but so if people recall a couple years ago, the Norden Parcel up in East Norwalk, which used to house the Northrop Grumman facility, has been basically empty now for years, and it's a large, still designated industrial parcel. A couple of years ago, a massive development application came in to put in a warehouse distribution center. And we really rallied the troops in, and we had kind of a sub-neighborhood group, hired a very good attorney, and we battled back on that, and actually the mayor even supported us battling back on it. And ultimately the applicant withdrew the application. It never went to hearing and got denied. It was withdrawn. Fast forward to this year, because the Planning and Zoning Department and the zoning regulation rewrites didn't remove, in fact, they had added in a use called transportation maintenance terminals. We now have actually the same applicant, Lisa, that was going to do the distribution warehouse center.
Amazon?
They've come in with an application to be able to house the Metropolitan Transportation Authority, the MTA, to have their bridge and rail maintenance operation facility there at Norden. Roughly 150 employees, a slew of different types of vehicles and trucks that would be coming out. Employees would arrive in the morning, get in all of these different work trucks and vans and equipment and go out to their sites, and then the same thing would happen in reverse at the end of the day. So East Norwalk, we're looking to reduce the truck traffic that's already here, not increase it. And we're looking to reduce, this is not considered heavy industrial, but we've been looking for several years for the city to be proactive and come up with a less industrial, less, environmental impact for that parcel. I really need to come on and do another segment on the background of this, but suffice it to say that the applicants filed 1 week before the new regulations went in that would have prohibited this use up there.
Oh, you're kidding.
So they beat the clock, and it was, I think it was 8 to 10 days beforehand.
But isn't it relevant? But isn't it relevant to the commissioners that the city does not want to move in this direction? The city obviously does want this there because the city is the one that left it in the regulations from the last go-around. They actually added it in, and they added it in at the same time frame that we believe this application was being prepared. But wait a minute, Diane, hold on. I'm
illegal.
Confused. Wait, Diane, I'm confused. Okay. I thought you just said they got it in a week before the regulations changed.
So there were two regulation changes. The original regulations up there did not allow this use. In 2022, under an industrial zoning study regulation change that went in, the city put the use in. Hang on 1 second, Lisa.
Yeah, I can hear that.
I got somebody beeping back here. They added the regulation in to the industrial zoning regulations. Okay, ENA came back and begged them to take several objectionable uses out, one of which was this. We said it doesn't belong up there. It doesn't actually belong anywhere in our city at this point, and please take it out. But Steve Kleppen didn't recommend that, and the commission sided with him, unfortunately. In the next go-around, we begged, and it did come out. But those regulations were not effective till February 19th of this year. So we were breathing a sigh of relief knowing that he took a few of these things out of there, including this one, as of right, or a site plan review. But they filed, like I said, I think they filed February 12th, and the new regulations that they would not allow this went into effect on February 19th.
But that's my point. When the commissioner was looking at this, even though they see that it was, quote, allowed under then, the fact that the town went in a different direction, isn't that relevant to their ultimate decision because they know the town doesn't really want this?
No, and because I don't think the law allows them. Now, they may take that into account personally, but if they were to articulate that as their reason for denial, you would just leave me open to appeal, I'm sure.
I see.
Because it was timely filed under the law. I mean, and I'm sounding like you, like a lawyer, that I should have been. Because it was timely filed under the then current regulations. They could say as much as we wouldn't have allowed this today, it was filed under regulations that allow it. And it's not, here's the other important point, Lisa. When it did go into the regulations in the industrial zone for 2022, it went in as what's called a site plan review.
Yep.
Not as a special permit, which is, even though it doesn't always protect us, and God knows in East Norwalk, we know that, it does provide more protections and more subjective, more discrepancy.
Yes, more room to put conditions on for the P&Z and all kind of things.
Exactly,
right.
and much more discretion to outright deny something, because ultimately you can't. If you got, and we've said it before, if you got to put 30 conditions on something to make it, palatable or to make it workable, then you should be denying the thing anyway. So.
So is this coming in as a site plan review or a special permit? Site
plan review.
Oh,
so legally, what that means for the folks who are listening, the basic difference is this. If the application was filed in a manner that meets the zoning regulations, setbacks, yada, yada, if it meets the regulations, then the commission must approve. There's no out for them to approve it. However, there are several standards that they can take into consideration where then I don't know that at that point they can deny it, but that's where they can, put on very, very heavy conditions. In this case, I don't know that any of them would protect us, but essentially, we expect for it to get approved.
Diane, does
Wednesday.
It pass? Let me ask you this. Does it pass the smell test that it's the same applicant, that they went back and forth, that eventually the city gave in and said, fine, and I will do what you want, but these people came in a week ahead of time? Does that sound right to you? It's,
even though it's legal, I just think that it doesn't pass the smell test, because if I look at the paper trail and I look at the timing of this, to me, it almost smells of spot zoning. It's clear to me that the regulations that allowed this in, really everything was designed around anticipation of this or a similar application coming in. Lisa, I think a lot of times people don't understand, and when we say that these applications are massaged and get ready for prime time months and years before the public sees them, I don't think people believe us, but that's the truth.
Yeah, it is.
You can go back in a paper trail to the extent that FOI allows us to, and you can see where these initial dialogues start. And many of these applications also have to involve the state to a lesser degree, the DOT and others, and you can see when they've been talking to them. So these things are kind of baked. I think people say it's baked by the time we get to see it. And so the cards are stacked against us, even regardless of the time frame. So now you've got the time frame against us. You got the fact that the thing is baked. No zoning, and you know this from Westport. You're really not going to have a P&Z director who would try to put something before the board that didn't meet the regulations. That's just not right. I mean, it's a waste of everyone's time. So you can assume that if it's making it to the commission, even for a preliminary review, that it either meets the regulations or there's something so minor that it can be conditioned away. But these things are baked and they're ready for prime time, and we kind of go in with the notion that they're going to get approved, and then they know that for the most part, and it's an uphill battle to do an appeal, and you can certainly talk to the same old Saugatuck folks over there. Mm-hmm. With the battle, they went through a 21-year battle, I believe, with the Hiawatha Lane.
Yeah.
Talk about time, energy, and money.
Yeah. Yeah. They were trying to save their neighborhood.
We can't do that, even if I had the energy to do something like that. So
Diane, what are you asking people to do who live in or care about East Norwalk, or who don't want to see this maintenance thing go up?
Thank you, Lisa.
Yep.
So we want them really to do three things. We want them to go onto our website, eastnorwalk.org, click on the link for the petition, read the 20 items we have in there that are compelling enough to, hopefully shut this thing down, if it's possible, and sign the petition. We'd also like them to send emails into the P&Z Commission, and we have the email address there. And then finally, we really want people to show up at the public hearing. It is in person and hybrid. So it'll be in person at 6 o'clock on Wednesday at City Hall in the community room, and also via Zoom. And so we want people to speak up, and you don't have to be technical or anything. You can just, say that you for all the reasons, E&NA has pointed out, or maybe where they live or their experience with operations like this, that they are opposed to this use being put there. And then I'll close with this, though, Lisa. This is a parcel, again, that's been empty for some time, and it does drive me nuts when people come back to ENNA and say, well, what do you people, first of all, the you people gets me, but what do you people want to see up there if it's not all this industrial? So, that doesn't fall to us to have to articulate an alternative to these, but we have on a number of occasions not only thrown out some ideas for that parcel, but we like to point out that Mr. Kleppen, the P&Z director, several years ago, the consultant who did the industrial study, recommended that Norden Parcel is so unique and so controversial that it requires a study of its own to determine what would be the best uses there, and to identify the pros and cons on a number of different uses. He chose not to fund that study and instead funded a waterfront industrial study. And so, had that been funded, the community would participate, with a consultant to try to identify more, agreeable uses there.
Okay. Well, all right. That's a lot, Diane Cece.
Yeah, there's a lot more to it, but that's kind of the gist of it. I'm sure it sounds familiar to you. Say that it's been an unfair playing field from the beginning. Even as of last Friday, Planning and Zoning was still posting documents that are relevant, and so that leaves us the weekend to look over them. They're still missing the landscape plan, which is required. They haven't done an environmental impact study they've provided us, which is required. So these are some technical things that may hold this thing up. But again, I still see it going through, and I hope residents, will, as we always say, we just want people to be informed and then to be engaged to the level that's that's best for them.
So Diane Cece, 6 p.m. Wednesday night. For those of you who were involved in this battle 2 years ago, a lot of it may sound familiar. You had a brief win, but the war rages on, and the next round, the next battle in the war, I guess, is 6 p.m. on Wednesday night, in person and hybrid. You can go on the eastnorwalk.org for more information about this if you care about it either way. Diane Cece of ENNA, thank you so much for being on the show with us today.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Lisa. Good to talk to you.
Me too. We'll be right back with Lisa on the Law. Stay tuned. I'll take your questions at 203-333-9422.